you know the punchlines, like how do you revive an old account that your company just gave you after another salesperson lost it? 2 steps. Number 1, fall on your sword, just like I told you. And then when you get the rescue, then you say, it's basically a do-over and I'm going to be the dummy on purpose. And I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions and see if I can truly help and solve a problem or need for you. What's happening, Sales Ascender? So let's just jump right into it. Today we had a great question come through by Ryan. Ryan asks this. He says, Sean, how do I revive an old account that my company gave me after another salesperson lost it? What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give you a frame of reference. There's kind of 2 steps on it. Number 1, fall on your sword. Number 2, use something called the dummy curve. So falling on your sword is the technique number 1. Technique number 2 is called the dummy curve. So I'm going to explain both of these things in theory and then kind of give the full answer here kind of at the end. So what does it mean when I say fall on your sword? Falling on your sword is what we call getting a rescue from your client, right? So that's the solution that you want. Okay, so think about like back in the old days, like the ninja and samurai in Japan, when they have made like some sort of a fatal grave mistake. What do? They take their little knife and they stick it, they fall on their own sword and they actually like commit suicide because they disgrace the honor. And like, that's kind of the whole thing with the Japanese culture, which is really interesting to learn about and read about. But the fact is in sales, you can do the same thing verbally, not obviously don't stab yourself with any weapons. That'd be crazy. But so how do you fall on your sword? So basically you come into the account and you start a conversation with that person and you say, listen, like, I don't know what happened before, but like, I know it's kind of our fault. So you fall on your sword, you fall on the company's sword. So it's like, hey, I know this is our fault that we lost the account. And that's the big elephant in the room. So like addressing it early in the sales conversation is going to be very vital to making sure that this happens. And then once you've gotten them to say, it's okay, that's the rescue that you want your client to tell you is like, no, it's okay. Like, I get it. You're a new guy. Right? That's what you're looking for. Like that's the piece, right, in the conversation. So literally you just go in there and you say, hey, I'm with so company. I know that we've had this background of, we didn't do a good job and I know it was our fault. So that's how you fall on your sword. That's a very quick way of saying it. And then when they come back, and I would use a little bit more softening statements around that, but then literally your client or the prospect's going to say back to you like, no, it's okay. Like, I get it. Let's have a conversation. And once you've gotten them to rescue you psychologically, what that's done for your prospect now is now they feel like they have the upper hand when in fact they don't, because you're emotionless over that. It doesn't even matter, right? So now you've psychologically given them a feeling of like, oh my gosh, like this guy just admitted that his company was wrong. Now I'm going to say, it's okay, don't worry about it. I'm going to listen to him. And so that's the first step. So like falling on your sword. So that's how that works. Right. So the technique is to fall on your own sword, say, hey, I know my company made a mistake. And the response that you're looking for to solicit out of them is it's okay. And getting a rescue from your client saying it's okay, don't worry about it. So that's the first step. The second step is something called the dummy curve. Now, the dummy curve, I'm gonna explain this to you because this is a story that has sat near and dear with me, and I'll just share it with you. So let me explain how the dummy curve is and how it works. And basically the punchline is acting like a dummy on purpose is a sales professional or sales ascender's best friend. So acting like a dummy on purpose, what does that mean? Well, let's go back a few years and let's talk about little Timmy. So little Timmy just got out of high school, or he's middle of high school. He just got his driver's license and he's driving around and he comes home and he's like, I don't have anything to do. I'm going to sit on the couch. And his dad comes downstairs and says, Tim, look, you need to go get a job. You have a car now. You have to go do all this stuff. Like, you have to be a responsible adult. And so Timmy says, okay, I'll go get a job. Well, where can I go get a job? The first thing he thinks of is he's like, well, my dad, you are friends with the guy over at the hardware shop. So I'm going to go ask the guy who is a friend with my dad to get a job at the hardware shop. So Timmy drives his little new car over, his beat up old jalopy over to the hardware shop. And he gets out and he struts in and he walks up and he goes in and sees Mr. Flynn. Mr. Flynn is the owner of the hardware shop. And little Timmy walks up and says, hey, Mr. Flynn. And Mr. Flynn, not thinking anything, says, hey, Timmy, how's it going? How's your dad? And Timmy says, well, actually, my dad wanted me to come over here, and which was not like the real truth, but that's how he played the move when he went into the store. And then he said, Mr. Flynn, look, my dad wanted me to come over here. He basically told me I needed to get a job, and I thought of no one else but you. I feel like I could be an asset to your store, but I just don't know how or where or why. And because Mr. Flynn and Timmy's dad had such a strong relationship, that Mr. Flynn said, okay, listen, Timmy, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you a job. That's fine, because we just had a guy quit. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk to the back of my store where the heaters are, and you're going to sell nothing but heaters. And in fact, it's the lowest producing part of our revenue, so it doesn't even matter. Like, I'm not worried or concerned about it for now. And so little Timmy says, great, this is a perfect job. And he goes and says, Mr. Flynn, what do I do? Mr. Flynn says, just go back into the section, sit on a box. And if any clients or potential customers come up, just ask them questions. Okay, sounds easy enough. So little Timmy goes back and he sits down in the heater shop, and he sits on a bucket and he's waiting for the first prospect. And the first prospect shows up, and it's this little old lady. And she wanders into the heater section, and she goes, hey, Sonny, I'm looking for a heater. And so little Timmy says, like what he was instructed, hey, just ask a question. Okay, well, miss, what kind of heater? What do you look for? What do you need? And so the little lady just automatically starts spilling this story about how her husband just passed away, and she lives in a pretty small home. And so as this starts to go on, Timmy just interrupts and says, well, let's walk over while you're telling me the story. I love the story. Let's just start looking at heaters and see which one's going to be the best for your needs. And she says, great. So they get up and they're walking, and this little old lady continues to tell her story. And it gets to the place where like she gets so emotionally hooked into her story that as soon as Timmy pulls out like the first heater and opens it and starts looking at it, and he goes, this one looks okay. And she goes, I'll take it. Boom. And so she picks up the box. Well, like Timmy picks up the box, and they walk to the front of the store, and she buys it. And Mr. Flynn is like, whoa, what just happened? Like, you just sold a heater. That's insane. And so he goes back, and the same process repeats itself over and over and over. And all Timmy was doing was letting the prospect come in and kind of like a dummy saying, hey, what do you need? Let's go look at a heater that might fit those needs, and let's figure it out. And every single time that created a sale. So much so that the first quarter comes around, and Mr. Flynn says, hey, we're going to send you to heater school, Timmy, because you're awesome at sales. And so Timmy's like, great. He flies across the country, and he goes into heater school, and he learns everything about heaters. He watches the videos. He gets the tech specs. He just becomes a master at it. He comes back. When he comes back, he's like, Mr. Flynn, I got this. I'm going to make this the most profitable section of your store. Stomps into the back, sits on his bucket, and just waits. Next prospect that wanders into the heating department is this young couple. And this young couple says, hey, we're looking for a heater. And without waiting or asking any questions, Timmy dives in and says, I know everything. I am the expert. I will show you. Cue up the video. And he has his little counterpart cue up a video about heaters and the coils and all the techie stuff that nobody needs to know about. It's called Technobabble. And this young couple's like, this is a weird, bad buying experience. Don't want to be in this scenario. And so they ended up leaving and not buying a heater. Well, that process continues over and over and over for little Timmy. And so now little Timmy's in the back of the store. He's like, what the heck just happened? Like, I haven't made a sale in like a week and a half. And then 2 weeks go by, and 3 weeks by. And then Mr. Flynn comes back to the back of the store, and he's furious. And he's like, Tim, I sent you to heater school. I spent all this money on you, and you're not producing any more sales. Like, what happened? And there is within the point of my story. Because when Timmy first started, he was selling as a dummy. He was acting like a dummy on purpose because he didn't know any better. And a lot of sales pros, a lot of sales professionals get to this place where they become so involved in what they're doing that they're just like, oh my God, I know all the tech specs about heaters. I'm going to share everything. Before the prospect can even say anything, it's just shoved down their throat. And so when he started doing this, people were like, this is a bad buying experience. And they ended up leaving and not making an investment or a purchase with Tim. And so the moral of the story, like I mentioned to you, is to act like a dummy on purpose, even though you're already an expert in the topic. Okay. And so how does this apply now that you've heard the story? You know, the punchlines, like how do you revive an old account that your company just gave you after another salesperson lost it? 2 steps. Number 1, fall on your sword, just like I told you. And then when you get the rescue, then you say, well, hey, listen, like before I dive in, obviously I know a lot about my company and there's a lot of things that have been changed. Let me just ask, are you struggling with this? Are you concerned about that? Are you frustrated by this? Are you annoyed this is happening? Are you pissed off this is going on in your business? And then just shut your mouth. Because you could come at it with, here's all the tech specs, here's all the data, here's all the stuff my company does. Or you can just sit back and say, you know what? Like, we messed up. I get it. You giving me the okay. Now let's start over, right? It's basically a do-over, and I'm going to be the dummy on purpose. And I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions and see if I can truly help and solve a problem or need for you. Does that sound okay? Boom. Now you've got it, right? And then all of a sudden, your conversation lights up. And this is how you start to revive the relationship, because really, like, people buy from people they like and trust. Don't forget that. So if you're going into this specific scenario, then what you want to do is you want to stay focused on becoming likable and trustable by the person that you're speaking with. So again, that is the way that I would revive an old account if my company gave it to me after another salesperson booted it. That is the secret. It's a two-step formula. I hope this was helpful for you today. If you know any other sales pros that might be in this specific scenario, please share this video over to them all the way. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe, right? If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Would love to have that subscription, because if you want to master sales, like, I'm going to teach you, right? Like, I have 20 years of knowledge that I'm dumping into these things, and I think it'll be valuable. So with that said, I love your face. Happy Tuesday. And this is another successful high ticket tune-up. We'll see you tomorrow.